Okay, so Bezras Hashem Chevra, we're going to continue with our weekly shir on the Torah of the Glein and the Tzaddik Rav Yitzchak Maya Morgenstern Shlita. And this is from a sefer that they compiled, Likutei HaMachachma on Purim, which is a compilation of Drushim on Shar Kavanos, Pri Eitz Chaim, on Ma'amarim that have been printed in the past, in different Svarim, in different Yamei HaChachma, as well as all of the Drushei Elokim Chaim, the Dei Chachma Lanafshecha Ma'amarim that have been given over in, whether it's Parsha Shkalim, or HaChodesh, or Zachor, Para, as well as Torahs from the day, a commentary on the Kamarna Rebbe's Perush on Megillas Esther, Kesem Oifir, commentary on the Megillah itself, different inyanim with regards to the kavanos of the Nesira, remarkable things. Ad kadei kach, there's even kavanos of vomiting on Purim, and here brought from the tzaddikim. But what I want to focus on is a small nakuda. It's a small nakuda that when I read it over Shabbos, it really hit me as a fundamental. I mean, most of the inyanim that you come across in the Rebbe's writings are fundamental in their essence. But this teaching for me is something that I want to try and live with, especially in the days of Purim, where the general framework is one of Bahala, one of intensity, one of distraction, one of many things to do, different responsibilities, different desires to be here, to be there, different drives pushing us back to be here instead of there, all various forms of expressions. And it's not a chiddush that on Purim, when there are Oires Merubim, the day of Purim, according to the Arizal, the Mashmaus is that it's a day higher than Shabbos, a day higher than the Moadim, a day higher than Yom HaKippurim, as expressed in the Tikkunei Zohar. But Yemei HaPurim Ha'ela are not simply a fun day and a holy day in the sense that we are most naturally ourselves. The fact is that we are most naturally ourselves with regards to the holiest day, and the Oros of Purim are the things that we tap into most, the calmness of Purim, the lack of lachatz on Purim, the menucha v'simcha that a person wants to try and cultivate. Ultimately, the scream out of the amke hanefesh of Hatzileni miklipas Haman va'amalek, and ultimately the deepest desire in the world to come to a place of Ad L'Yada ben Arhaman and Baruch Mordechai, which is the Hakar of Or Ein Sof that's mislabesh on this day. The Chiddush of Yom HaPurim, as the Arizal describes it, is there's the Ha'ara Nifla of Yesod Da'aba that's mislabesh itself in Makom Ha'asiya Mamish, which means to say that the Bittul B'Metzias associated with Chachma finds itself in an impossibly present way on the day of Purim. What that means for a person like myself is that what that allows us to do on Purim is to imagine HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in a way that we typically don't allow ourselves to imagine it. But because of this Gevaldika Ha'ara, because of this intensity of light that descends on Purim, which is mamish, a light that's chutz min haseder, a light that on a certain level can only be accessed unconsciously in a state of ad l'yada, whether that's sleeping or intoxication through sleep through intoxication, it makes no difference how or why. I mean, poskim have a discussion, but in the end of the day, ad l'yada is a mindset. It's not a state of intoxication. The Rebbe has a famous tshuva, famous to me because I love it so much. It's a tshuva about whether a person can be yotzei kiddush on Yontav and Shabbos with grape juice, with mitzvah anavim. Because l'chayra, according to most of the poskim, especially on Yontif, where there's a chiyuv of simcha on Yontif, not oneg of Shabbos, but a simcha on Yontif, the mashmos, in accordance with the poskim, is that you need an intoxicating beverage. And so the Rebbe has a whole diyun, ultimately based on a tshuva from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zchus Yagan Aleinu, who was matir, grape juice, for Simchas Yantif. And the Rebbe has mamish a theory that's so nifla. He says that be'emes shichrus, an intoxication, is not a din in an intoxicating substance. It's not a physiological response to dopamine receptors that are flooded by way of alcohol and alcoholic properties. Rather, there is a shichrus within tam itself. It's the taste, it's the sweetness that elicits the joy. And it makes a person recognize the chashivas of a beverage that enables a person to access that point of joy. And therefore, says the Rebbe, it has absolutely nothing to do with the alcohol content of a beverage, but everything to do with the chashivas that we give to a beverage. Therefore, he allows us to be yotzei simchas yantif with grape juice and non-alcoholic beverages. And the Rebbe says, we learn this tshuva from who? From Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Because Rav Shlomo Zalman Chachma Shlomo is the bechina of Chachma Amitis. That Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was a person person who walked around with a smile on his face at every second, in spite of the suffering that he was going through. Rav Shlomo Zalman had not only migraines, but migraines that were induced by certain, I believe it was a brain tumor at a certain point in his life. The Rebbe points out that Rav Shlomo Zalman was one who understood the secret of Chachma, which is the secret of Bittul, which is the secret of Simcha, and that's not dependent on any intoxication versus non-intoxication. It's rooted in the tam, in the aesthetic, in the experience that we have. So the intoxication of Purim is bavadai, not rooted in any type of intoxicating substance for those who don't want to be partaking in intoxicating substances. For those who are partaking in intoxicating substances, we have Torahs from the Emek Bracha from Rav Pomeranchik, who is the Talmud Mufak of the Brisker Rav, where he describes the shichrus of Rav Yisrael Salanter on Purim. He says a dangerous Torah, literally. It's like a frighteningly dangerous Torah. He says that Rav Yisrael Salanter would get so shikr on Purim that he would dance with complete abandonment. And then he goes into a chakir of what exactly the chiyuv of shichrus on Purim is. And he says that the entire day carries with it a chiyuv of shichrus to Purim. There's a need to be in a perpetual state of ad lo yada throughout the entirety of Purim. But when a person reaches a darg of shichrus delot, they're patur from mitzvos. So the entire tachlis of the day is to maintain that state of shichrus at the state where you get to a place of shichrus delot, you're patur from the mitzvah at that point until you kind of come back down. But the moment you come back down, you're chayav to tap back into that place once again, which again should not be applied on a practical way. But that's the emek bracha. And so the Rebbe is giving us here a profound, exactly, Baki V'ratza, Baki V'shov, exactly. And the Iker here, the Iker Nekuda here is the koyach of the peh. This is from, this likut is taken from an earlier sefer that they published, Likutei HaMachachma and Hilchos Tefillin, a beautiful blue sefer that's been not able to found in the shuk for a long time. But in the back of this Sefer on Tefillin, there is a beer on the osios of the Aleph Beis, and there is a chelik of Manspach, Mem Soifis, Nun Soifis, Tzadi Soifis, Pei Soifis, and Chav Soifis, which, as the Arizal points out in the beginning drushim on Purim, are all shayach to the Hanhagos of Purim, Haravas Rivenu, Adanas Dinenu, and all of the news are the dinim, which are associated with the Sofiot letters, which point to the end of something. It's a din, and on Purim we take that and we're mahapechid. But when talking about the Ois Pei Soifis, the Rebbe is talking about the koyach of Dibor. Why is it that Rabbi Nachman was so invested in the koyach of Dibor? There are many people who came before Rabbi Nachman who spoke about his poididus, but the chiddush of Rabbeinu was his poididus bepeh. And we see over and over from the tzaddikim the importance of bringing the ritzonos and the chukos that we have out by way of speech. And the Rebbe connects this peh of the peh to the peh of Purim. Because Purim is also an inyan of speaking it out. The entire nace of Purim takes place because Esther began to speak. Because Esther was Mevi Davar B'Shem Omer. Because Mordechai Yada, and he decided to speak. He decided to speak when he saw Bigson and Sarah. He decided to speak when he saw that Klal Yisrael needed. The tzaddikim are fine. Mordechai and Esther are fine whether or not the Jewish people are saved. But the chiddush of Purim is that they decided to speak. They offered their peh to bring out this koyach. And the Rebbe says that the koyach of the peh, as we see, is the koyach to be shoyleit on the bilbul of the machshavos. The mind is mishotet b'chol ha'olamos. The mind is perpetually running, never stopping. That's the natural state of the mind. There's an endless flow of thought, or potential thought, that is flowing through the mind at any given moment. And in the space of that bilbul hadas, where all of the thoughts are mishotet ba'avir, there's a kli that we have of dibor. And as we all know, when I speak about something, if I'm holding myself in a particular space of language, I slowly but surely gain control over the mishoititos in my mind. The thoughts stop flowing as quickly because I'm now expressing them in a kli of dibor. So the kli of dibor has the ability to slow down the flowing nature of the bilbulei hamoichin. And the reason for this, the Rebbe says, is because the peh is the place where the das of Atik is niskala. Okay, so it's a statement from the Arizal. What it means to say over here is that the das, the ability to slow things down and to connect to the calmness at the heart of things that comes about by way of speech, is something that's mushrash in the loftiest place referred to as Atik or Kesser. Now, before we go into the osios of the Rebbe, elsewhere the Rebbe spends a lot of time utilizing teachings of the son of the Rashash, the Divrei Shalom, because this is not clear in the other Meforshim of the Arizal. But we know that there's a mazla of the Megillah, that there's the 3 times Havaya which come out when we're reading the Megillah. The Bris Kunas Olam has an arichas on this. But what are these Yud Gimel Tikkunim that are coming down b'shas Kriyas HaMegillah? There's a mashmos in the Rashash that really it's a hashra'ah of Reishad Lo Asyada. What we're drawing down on Purim through Megillah is the highest iris of Kesser, which the tzaddikim point out. Kacha yesel leish asher melech chafetz bikaro. Zak the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, what does kacha mean? Kacha is Roshei Tevos Kesser kol aksarim. The highest imaginable point within the Seder Shtalshalis is in the Skala on Purim. Kacha yesel leish. And the tzaddikim say, how is this lofty point of Kesser in the Skala? Through Ratzain B'li Tam. Kacha, it is how it is. Don't ask me a reason for why it is. It is how it is. That's the light of Purim. But Kacha ala b'machshava as well. Exactly. Kacha is a darga higher than Kach. Kacha is a darga higher than Kach. The Arizal writes in Kriyat Shema in Priyat Chaim that the secret of Kacha ala b'machshava is the Chaf Kefufa and the Chaf Pshuta, which are two forms of Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh bekoyach, a potential Mesiras Nefesh, and Mesiras Nefesh bepoyel, a potential and an actual Mesiras Nefesh. Esther had both. Kacha is adding the hey of Atika, which is the recognition that it's Kesser Kol Aksarim. It's even beyond whether I'm Moser Nefesh or not. I'm still being Moser Nefesh every moment. There's an amazing Meshech Chachma about Hasach Zu Daniel. Hasach Zu Daniel. Why is he referred to as Hasach? Because he was Nichtach from his Gadluso. Daniel was Nechshav as an amazing person. Why? Because he was Moser Nefesh for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Comes Purim, when every Yid in the world reveals that they're ready to be Moshe Nefesh for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the godless of Daniel is not so great anymore. He's just like every other Yid. And the Meshech Chachma says that's why in Purim, Daniel is referred to as Hasach, because his godless of Mesiras Nefesh is shown to really be part and parcel of what every Yid is capable of. That's the Or of Kacha, that's the Or of Radla, that's Mislabesh. And the Iker Tachlis of Radla, as the Rebbe points out from the Kabbalah Sagaoinim, is Yishuv Hadas. Yishuv Hadas is what we're trying to get to. At the heart of the intoxication, it's Yishuv Hadas. Now let's look at the words of the Rebbe, Be'ezras Hashem. Lahavin ha'inyan yoter bebechinas mi besari echaz ha'eloikai. To understand the matter with a little bit more depth from the perspective that the Baal Shem Tov gives us, which is that I grasp HaKadosh Baruch Hu from my flesh itself. Shehinei royim b'metzias. We see in reality, sheroiv b'nei Adam, lo yicholim la'atzor machshavtam ula'akva meprichasa memutzirasa ula'kavana zman rav kiritzainam. What we find, generally speaking, is that most individuals are unable to stop or arrest their thoughts or to prevent them from moving forward and floating into different speedy places and to spend any time paying attention to anything for an extended period of time. But through speech, we have the secret ability to prevent the moichin from leaving where we want them to be. By being marich be'echad, with my mouth, I have the capacity of hopefully being marich be'echad in my mind. Shekol koyach hisavkus al davar mikoyach hadibor. Because the entire strength of sitting with something, of preventing it from going its natural course to the next thing every second, is through the power of speech, of sitting down and speaking it out. Like we see, for example, that through speech, so he's talking about people who see this, right? But seemingly there are people who spend a lot of time with language and davening, and they find that they're really able to be machavin for an extended period of time. And the tzaddikim learn that in truth the secret of language, the secret of speech, is the capacity to force a thought in our mind to stay for a little bit longer than we tend to have our thoughts stay for. Because in truth, das, knowledge, the ability to be ma'akev something, is rooted in the vision of godliness. Das is rooted in a place of chachma. Shahadas noisenes koyach ha're'iyah. That das gives me the ability to look and gaze for a little bit longer. Kamoy lamashal k'shaloimdem sugya. When I'm learning a sugya, v'choyzrim aleha harbe pa'amim, and I'm reviewing the sugya over and over and over, ad shenekasher aleha chazak, until I develop, after the boredom of repetition, I find that I have cultivated a deeper hiskashrus to that sugya now, because I could be chayzer at what? Balpeh. I can speak it out over and over until I come to hamakas hadas. Bebechinas hadas she'enyana chibor b'chayzek le'inyan she'oisek boy. That the das is niskala through the chazara and through the dibor, by repeating it over and over and over. You see this in nigunim also, as the tzaddikim and Lubavitch would point out, that by repeating a nigun over and over, It's by being ma'akev the minds from running forward to another nigun and encountering ha'amakas hadas that takes place through the chatira, by the engraving of my feet into the ground, into this moment through speech itself. And through speech, niftach ha'yedezeh b'chinas ha're'iyah. At this point, I am now able to see the sugya in a new way. Shemargish ki'ilu roya ha'sugya v'hasvaros mul einav. Ad kedei kach that I've repeated it so much that it's almost engraved in the air right in front of my eyes. V'rov ha'anashim ein lahem koyach ha'hisavkus v'ha'chibor b'chayzek shel hadas ad sheyiftechu al yedei etz ha're'iyah. Most people do not have this ability of ha'amakas hadas, of forcing the mind to stay still in one place for an extended period of time, to the point that it enables me to see the matter in front of my eyes. V'hadibor melamedzos, but speech allows us kind of an underground way of encountering this. Umisha zoicha lepnimius koyach ha'hisavkos, and someone who merits the inner interiority of the power of stopping the mind, of stilling the mind, of preventing the mind, shabbab'chinas koyach hadas, in the aspect of das, ein sarach kfar ledibor. Someone who has encountered the pnimius of das, they don't need speech. And at that point, the das gives birth to a tremendous pleasure and a tremendous patience. There's a patience at the heart of it. I can say the same thing over and over and not give in to the natural tendency to say more or to say different words, to try and encounter the idea in a more profound way or a more radical way, but rather to trust the words in front of me and to repeat them over and over and over and over again until that miyut hamachzika samaruba, those words allow me to be ma'im in my das and to encounter something.
You do it before Kiyas, let's say.
B'vadai, right? Repetition, and you do it in nigunim. You do it in nigunim, mamish, that the repetition of a nigun over and over, it's not repeating the same thing. Every shlav of repetition is a ha'amakas hadas. It's not necessarily a spatial descent or a spatial ascent. There's a conflict in terms of whether when we're being ma'amik in our das, we're going down inwards into ourselves, or whether we're ascending upwards out of ourselves. But bein kach u bein kach, the ikar is to be ma'amid es hadas, to stand sturdily in the belief that everything that I possibly need is right here, right now. That's the Indian of b'chol derachecha de'ehu, that in each and everything that I encounter, I need to encounter the secret of das and to be able to be satisfied with this. Now the Rebbe is going to say a little bit about Kesser, but before we could go into what the Rebbe says about Kesser, let's go over a basic hakdama. Unlike other spheros in the Seder HaShtalshalos, Kesser plays a dual role. Kesser is both the lowest level of the higher world, meaning the malchus of the higher world, as well as the highest level of the lower world. It's like a link in a chain that transitions from one level to another. So it's like a two-story floor, a two-story building. The higher level is the lowest level of the higher world, and the lower level is the highest level of the lower world. It's the malchus of the previous world, which is the ani of the previous world, that as it transitions downwards becomes the kesser of the lower world, which is the ayin of the lower world. Ani v'ayin. So it's the end of the upper level and the beginning of the higher level. Kesser, because it's the intermediary between various worlds, needs to occupy, like any intermediary, needs to occupy both of these roles. And so how does Kesser occupy that role of both being the lowest of the higher world and the highest of the lower world? So there's two elements in Kesser. As Partsufim, they're referred to as Atik and Arich. Atik Yoimin, which implies a certain removal and an ancient quality, represents the lowest level of a higher world. The lowest imprint of some ancient thing that was previously here but no longer present. That's Atik Yoimin. That's the Malchus of the Elyon. That's the Ani HaElyon. That's the Malchus of the higher world. And Arich Anpin, which is the highest parts of that we relate to in the worlds that we function in from our perspective in our world, is the highest part of the lower world. So Atik Yoimin is the upper part of Kesser, and Arich Anpin is the lower part of Kesser. Now these two qualities, generally speaking, are expressed in Chassidus as Ratzon and Ta'anug. That Ta'anug, pleasure, is rooted in Atik Yoimin. Above Atik Yoimin, which is Reishad Loas Yada, is Emuna, and below Atik Yoimin, which is Arich Anpin, is Ratzon. We generally identify Kesser as a desire, but at the same point we see that Kesser can also be seen as Tainug. The Rebbe Rashav in Tarf Reish Samach Vav has many, many pages discussing which one is higher. Because we see that I have Ratzon for something that gives me Tainug, but I only have tainug when I have ratzon for something. So it's a question of which is interior and which is exterior. But sofa davar kol nishma, the ikar gilui of Kesser is the desire of pleasure and the pleasure of desire. Both kind of dance together at that point. But over here, the Rebbe is going to be masbir that the avoida of Atik is the avoida of mesinus, of patience, of menucha, of being fully present in what is in front of me right now. The avoida of Arich is bahala, is running and rushing and trying to take care of every element. And the ikar hasaga of Kesser is the ability to balance these two opposites. It's what the Rebbe refers to as zrizus b'mesinus, a perpetual movement with a calmness at the heart of the perpetual movement. A running everywhere that's associated with the ratzon of Arich that wants to be makabel everything from everywhere at every moment because there's so much to be done. But at the same point, not to, God forbid, fall into a bahala, but to believe at the very same moment that there is a menucha v'simcha sha'atar etzeba resting at the heart of that bahala, which gives me the ability to believe that I don't need to do anything at all to accomplish anything because I am right where I need to be. And the relationship between Atik and Arich. Atik is a higher level, Arich is a lower level, and therefore we can say that the body, so to speak, that rests inside of the garment is the level of Atik, and the garment of the body is Arich. So what we're talking about here is the garment of Bahala, the garment of running and doing all sorts of different things each moment, but that garment is covering over the secret of Menucha and calmness at the heart of all things. It's a zrizus, a movement all over the place, bimasinus, with a calmness at the heart of it. Like the Rebbe says, he says, we wrote this elsewhere, Sha'atik hu bebechinas koyach ha-mesinus de kedusha, as Rabbi Nachman writes in Torah Vav. That Atik is the secret of the power of holy calmness and patience, in opposition l'umas Arich shebebechinas zrizas de kedusha. In relationship to Arich, which is the intensity of movement and the desire and the urgency at the heart of all things to accomplish everything from a place of holiness. The Arich miluba shal gabe Atik, and Arich engarbs itself on top of Atik, meaning to say, Moira al bechinas zrizas gedoyle bechitzonius, externally a profound level of urgency and rush, shebetoicha yesh mesinus gedola. But inside of that rushing and that running and returning is a deep secret of comfort, calm, and patience. She'arichu bebechinas sheratzim b'mesiras nefesh b'zrizas hagedoyle b'yoyser litvos hashchina kavyachol. That arich is the representation of the highest level of the lower world, is the desire to grasp everything by way of zrizas at every moment. Kamol lemashol, and what's the example? Sheratzim litvos hasarakeves. We're chasing to catch the bus. We're chasing to catch the train. It's the image of an individual who's running like a madman because of the urgency of the moment. And if I don't run as fast as I possibly can, I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss out on something. Ach atik hu bebechinas ani Hashem. But Atik is the aspect of Ani Hashem. Why is Atik the aspect of Ani Hashem? Because Atik, we said, is the Malchus, is the lowest level of the higher world, and the lowest level of the higher world is the Ani. Arich is Ayin, because it's the highest level of the lower world. And so what does Atik represent, as opposed to this intensity and urgency of rushing and trying to catch that bus? What Atik represents is Shenimtsaim Kvar Lamashal B'Soich HaRakeves. You're already on the bus. And so the secret of having Atik, Mislabish, and Arich, of Zrizas b'Mesimus, is on the one hand rushing with every ounce of urgency to catch the bus that we're about to miss, but at the heart of our rushing for that bus that we're about to miss is the knowledge that I'm already on the bus. I'm already where I need to be. Ve'ein larutz, ela efshar l'shavas b'noach u'lesanig l'reis koila maris and iflaim shamaru magala shchina. I don't have to rush anywhere. I'm not going to miss anything. I have the ability to be mistoivev. I have the ability to walk around slowly. Like Chazal say that La'aseh Lavo Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to take each and every one of us and to be matayel in Gan Eden with us. The language of to be matayel is a language of kind of just walking slowly, not moving anywhere, walking without destination. It's the mesinus at the heart of all things. So on the one hand, on Purim, I have a hargasha of the arich, which is I'm running to catch this bus. I'm going to miss out on everything if I don't catch it. So much to do, so much needs to be done. But at the heart of the running towards the bus, At the heart of the rush and the urgency, I have to hold in mind the secret of the messinus of Atik, which is that I am exactly where I need to be. Again, that awareness of the messinus and the menucha does not negate the need to continue running, nor does the need to continue running negate the messinus. It's the secret of the minei ubei. It's the aniva ayin bevasachas. It's the impossible paradox of every element of Purim. Bevadai. Bevadai. It's the same. This mechanism can be applied to every stira of emotions, that from one perspective, this emotion says this emotion says that, but from the perspective of Kesser, which is both at once in a simultaneous upholding of a paradoxical dance, both are true at the very same moment. And I could sit calmly, lisanig liras kalamaros and iflaim shamarim megal, and I have time to walk slowly in this world. Kemuva b'lekutei Maran, as Rabbi Nachman tells us, sheMashiach sidkenu, that Mashiach is going to be yizke to the bechinas of Atik. He's going to be zochet to that perspective of Atik, of being able to be b'mesinus without rushing, and therefore he's going to be zochet to the ani hayom yiladesicha. Everything is just today. It's just today. Everything is right here, right now, in this day. When I grab hold of that nakuda of calmness, I have control over all expressions of time. All of the rushing, all of the running that I have to do, it's all contained within that tiny dot of time. That tzadikim hagadolim, and the big tzadikim, and Purim, all of us as well. Shebechinas merkava lebechinas Kesser, where we all become a merkava to the aspect of Kesser. Atik ve'arich biachad. We have to learn to live with the secret of Atik and Arich at once, with zrizas b'mesinas. Hari mitzad echad, from one perspective, mislabshim b'zrizas hagadoyle b'yoser. We have to be engaged with that intensity of urgency to believe that each and every moment is fundamental to my existence. And what the Idra Rabbah starts off with, where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, Eitz lasos la'Hashem hifru sorasecha, there's come a time where time is too demanding. I'm late for an important date, right? And at that point we say, Mar d'chayva dachik, right? The Balabayas is pushing on us. There's an urgency. I have to run faster. There's an infinite amount of things that need to get done. I have to know everything. I have to get every aspect in. But within the zrizos, internally and in concealment, they operate with every element of patience and calm in the world. There's absolutely nothing to grab. In truth, there's nothing to grab. Why? Hashem Yisbaruch Hu Hakol. Because in truth, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everything. And when I find myself attached to the Shechina HaKadosh HaKavyachal Yeshvar Hakol, there's nothing for me to chase after. Okay, and then the Rebbe goes into a different distinction of different types of tzaddikim and their hanhagos. But for me, what this means on a practical level in preparation for a day of all days, a day that demands of the individual an urgency to accomplish everything, or a life that demands from a person the necessity to accomplish everything, where when I'm not productive, where I'm not feeling a hisalus in one way or another, there's no more affirmation that's coming. Right, and at that point, the person begins to languish and the desire to do more. And a person tries to throw more and more in order to solve that noise at the heart of themselves, which is telling them that they're not doing enough. But MS on Purim, we have to do all that there is to be done, but we also have to tap into the secret of menuchas emes shater otzeba, to realize that yes, I have to rush to do everything, but mamish, even if I don't accomplish anything, I've already accomplished everything. And in that way, in every moment of the day, whatever it is that I'm rushing to, I will also have the ability to sit b'mesinas. I will also have the ability to chap one moment of Purim. The Chedush Arim famously says, it's one of my favorite teachings about Purim, that that Klal Yisrael, through all of their tsaros throughout history, had the koyach to force HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand to give us one day where we could ask for anything in the world. One day where a yid can have everything. Kol ha'poishet yad noistim lo. If we ask be'emes, if we ask me'umka deliba,
we don't even have to ask.
Right? We have to just be. But even that takes a lot. To poishet yad. It's easier to ask sometimes than to actually show that tefillah li'ani kiyatov. The real tefillah of the ani, the ani that comes to the door and doesn't even say a word. You could see it on their face that they're in desperate need. Right? That poishet yad, it takes a lot to get to a place of pshita sayad, of letting go of all of the koyach b'yadayim. It's reaching into a place of hayadayim, the yadayim of Moshe Rabbeinu, the yadayim of Emunah, which we come to realize that our hands are ultimately doing nothing anyway. So all we could do is poishet it. And so, right, it's helpless, helpless, helpless. It's the bankruptcy of Purim. It's where a person comes mamish to the very bottom. And in that place, says the Chedush Arim, so Hashem gives us a day. Hashem gives us a day, but the Malachim come and they say, Rebbeinu Shalom, they're going to ask for Mashiach, and it's not time yet. They're going to ask for redemption, and it's not time yet. There's still things that need to get done. We know that. And so Hashem says, Taka, you're right, it's a problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to confuse them with the Bahala of the day, and we'll get them drunk. So this way we'll make sure that they're never truly asking for what they need to ask for. But be'emes we have the koyach to push back against that, and we can still ask for what we need to ask for, because within the Bahala and within the Shichrus, a person can still be oimed on the Nekuda HaPnimis, to take a moment, whether it's the Bahala of a parade or Megillah reading or the Tansing or the Mishlach Manos or the breakfast or the lunch or the Mincha Gedoyla or the Suda and the end of the Suda and the post-Suda and the Shushan Purim and all of the different inyanim and all of the Kelim Shonim of Purim. A person has to be able to stop for a second, to be Ma'amid al-Hadas, to be Ma'akev the Das and look around and say, Hakol Kan, Imani Kan, Hakol Kan. Everything is here right now. And then to go on to the next thing. And then I accomplish infinite growth, infinite levels of growth on Purim. And Be'ezras Hashem, to be Zocha, the Mitler Rebbe Schusay Agan Aleinu said that what he really wanted was his Hasidim to be sitting on street corners, fabringing on Atik and Arich, discussing Atik and Arich as if it was, child's talk. And Be'ezras Hashem on Purim, there's a Giloy of Liba Lefum Yagalia, that the heart is revealed to the mouth, and a person has the ability to talk whatever they want to talk about, to reach into the depths of Ginzei HaMelech, to reach out and receive the Sarbet HaZahav, and to grab hold of all of the deepest soidus of Kesser Be'ezras Hashem.